Maria. I am a peace activist and a practitioner of ancestral healing arts. Look at that. I think you should catch that. That's stunning. I really see that the core of why people are not taking action, although they see something is wrong, comes through trauma. And the fact that in our culture we've been conditioned to accept pain and discomfort and being bullied, because that's essentially what schooling does to us. We're taught from a very young age not to listen to the signals of our body, not to honor the cycles of our biological rhythms, and simply do what we're told to do. You know, we are given a certain time to eat in school, a certain time to go to the toilet in school, and so from a very early age we have learned to just follow orders, basically, and that is how we gain acceptance. It's a hardwired program that's in all of us. When you step out of that is an incredible liberation and a portal for personal growth, when you come to realize that you do have that power to actually decide how you live your life, what you do with your body, how you raise your children, you know, what kind of work do you do. So it's like a threshold, that an initiation that we have to pass through, like a rite of passage to becoming an adult, truly. Because this is how our societies have been built, at least in the West, is that we have a caretaker society, a society where the authority has assumed a position of a parental figure, where we run to whenever, you know, we're in trouble. So we've lost a lot of our survival skills. When we're in a crisis situation, that triggers, of course, the fight or flight response. You know, we're in a fearful state. So the natural thing to do is to look up to somebody who knows how to already respond to the situation, like a parent. If we haven't managed to go through that rite of passage of becoming a self-sovereign adult ourselves, so if that initiation is missing from our culture, then we will forever behave in infantile ways, and that's become the norm. In our culture, it is the norm that there are other people who decide things on your behalf. What is normal is whatever the collective is doing, what we consider the normal response to things. So when they talk about new normality, they are installing a new cultural program, a set of ways for us to respond to, in this case, a medical threat. And the process is do as the parent says, you know, follow their orders, the experts. But when you've come to learn how to heal yourself, you know, taking your health into your own hands, then you begin to see things from a very different perspective. And you begin to question, why can I not be the authority of my own health? Why can I not be the one who chooses how I feed myself, what medicines I use, whether I want to cover my vital airways or not? This is the big opportunity for us to grow up, basically, and come to discover that we all have an inalienable right to choose how we live our lives. You know, this is the non-aggression principle. Do no harm. It's very simple. If my health choices are based on my own conscious will, then everyone should respect that. And this is something that is beckoned from us now. It's to come to recognize that if you choose to follow the orders of these health authorities, you have the right to do so. That is your right. That's your freedom. But also, those of us who choose otherwise have equal right, because we all have the right to govern our own bodies. This is our property. All rights are based on property ownership. You can only govern that which is yours. But this new normality is trying to destroy that, so that we would no longer consider our bodies to be our own property, but simply an extension of the state. That they can mandate things on us, a mask, a test, a vaccine. There's loads of us who can see there's something very wrong in the situation, but are not expressing that. They're not voicing it. They're not taking action. And the reason is because they have not yet come to find their personal power, their adulthood. Dependency is always the prerequisite for slavery. And no clouds either, so it's like really bright sunshine. I see that in the freedom movement, there's an element that we don't really talk about as much, which I see that is a crucial part of even solving this entire thing, which is relationships. How do we respond when our own family members and friends are taking part in a worldview that is actually harmful to us? I can say from my own personal experience that it was extremely difficult for me to accept that the values that I'm fighting for, that I'm advocating for, my own family could not see. It felt like a kind of an abandonment and a process of grieving that I had to do to understand that they live basically in a completely different reality. I think a lot of us have trouble expressing those emotions. Emotions of disappointment, emotions of grief, emotions of anger. This, I honestly feel, is missing from a lot of our freedom movement. We tend to bottle things up and then project those traumatic experiences with our own friends and family, loss of friendship, being excommunicated, not being invited to Christmas anymore, this kind of experiences, not thoroughly going through it, not thoroughly expressing the pain, bottling it up inside, and then as a result, lashing out in protests. So I feel that energy is something that we need to look at. With which energy do we go to the streets? And if we have all this pent-up frustration and anger that we do not see as an opportunity to use as a catalyst for positive change, but use it to protest, then in fact our action will be perceived as something that the normal people, the ordinary people, will see hostile or radical. I think this gives material to the media as well to brand us as extreme, radical, or even like domestic terrorists, because the energy that many of us go to streets with is that of anger. And this is not to say anger isn't good, but I am inviting us to examine those emotions and those woundings, those traumas, and find another way to express them. I live in Andalusia, so south of Spain, right above Africa, Morocco, and we do our events on the coast there, so in Fuengirola, in Malaga, in these coastal towns. The events that we do are every week there on the streets, on a beach boulevard or a city square. A lot of us point our attention to the tyrants and keep saying, no, stop doing this. If we just protest enough, then they will hear us and they will take away the new pandemic law or whatever, but they are doing it consciously. So do we really believe that protesting against those who are consciously out to enslave us and inject strange, obscure, toxic substances into our bodies and into the bodies of our children, do we really believe that they're gonna listen to us if we say no? I believe in manifesting. So going into the streets, not to target the tyrants, but to target our communities. Bring them the good information, inspire them, and initiate dialogue with them. This is something that we do. We've been doing this kind of manifestation, street activism as we call it, every week since the summer solstice of 2020 in Spain. It's been having its own life, it's organically been changing. And our most refined form of this event is that we have 1 hour every Friday, a street activism event where we have signs that ask questions that trigger our community to think. So we're not saying no to anything. We're simply asking questions like, what kind of world are we creating for our children? Are we seriously teaching our children to fear human contact? How many vaccines does it take for your child to be free? There is a way to present our message in such a way that it isn't hostile and that it doesn't trigger defense mechanisms in people, because this is what we found. If you say vaccines kill, no this, no that, it feels hostile and people are put off by that. Whereas if you go on the streets to simply peacefully initiate dialogue with your community, they're far more likely to consider your message and to listen to you and even engage with you. This is what we found. And then after the first hour, we divide ourselves into smaller groups and we go visit the local shops and restaurants. And we go ask them, have you heard about the Great Reset? So we take this COVID story, which we're all absolutely exhausted to talk about, into the bigger context, and we bring out Agenda 2030, the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And we ask the business owners, the restaurant owners, have you heard about this? And we have flyers to give them more information, and most of them have no idea. They think this is some kind of tragic, incident. This is a one-off pandemic that comes every 100 years or so, and is not related to anything else. I see activism as truly an extension of healing arts, because you have the opportunity to inspire the collective with an empowering message. So I see activists as the activator, the positive cause that can create new realities. So for me, activism is very different from protesting. So I'm not a protester, I'm an activist. My job is to find solutions, to bring the good information, to inspire the community, to create dialogue. This is how we can heal our communities, is through dialogue, through speech. And then of course, I'm also coordinating the International Police for Freedom movement, which is a movement of law enforcement officers, soldiers, prison guards, firefighters, who want to restore dignity for their profession and are not happy with the way these policies are dehumanizing them and destroying trust in the community. So there are some true police officers out there who see this also as a human rights crisis and as a war against humanity. But this movement started in Spain. It was inspired by Policías por la Libertad, an association. I got to know them, and we had a very interesting discovery that this is probably the most important key in liberation from a tyrannical rule, is when police begin to disobey. They are the physical force that brings this new normality into reality. And so there's a group of these police in Spain, and I got to know them, and I said, look, this has to be made international, and do any of you speak English? Because I was live streaming from their manifestations, and I started being contacted by different journalists from around the world, from Germany, from Japan, and I said, they're all wanting to speak to you. And they said, well, Henna, you're gonna have to do those interviews on our behalf because none of us speak English. So I said, okay. So I started doing interviews, and explaining the whole concept of Policías por la Libertad, and eventually it turned into them saying, look, you just have to do one, like an international version of what this is. So that's what I did then. As an activist, I have experience of police liaison, and I see the merit of creating trust and relationship with the police to an extent where they can actually facilitate our demonstrations. And that way enable us to bring the message to the wider community more effectively. So building alliance and collaboration with the local police without compromising our rights in any moment, doing it with dignity and humanity. So I started Police for Freedom then in February 6th, 2021 in Barcelona, and now we have 16 different chapters at this moment around the world. There's many reasons why media is relishing all the police violence, and that is to create distrust between us and keep us separate so that we don't have these allies, armed allies. Because you can imagine how very different it is if all the police just step out and say, we refuse to enforce these immoral mandates on our own sisters and brothers. Is to keep us separate and to keep us from communicating from each other. And moreover, I see that part of the Great Reset, the Agenda 2030, is also this one world government change of society. So they are out to destroy national sovereign states. They're out to destroy national police force and local police force. And they want to bring one world police force. You see the militarization of police in the way that they wear their uniform. They have more and more padding and armor physically, and psychologically that does rewire you to behave in less human ways. And then you have the mask, you have the shields, you have the weapons, and you have a very dehumanized individual. The whole point of Police for Freedom is to bring this topic out openly and transparently and ask, what happens if we remove local policing? Because policing is all about community. Will we then receive, law enforcement from other countries and have to deal with people who don't even speak our language? What happens to liaison or negotiations at that point? And the next further step after that is, we are talking about transhumanism a lot these days, and the fusion of technology with biology. So are we even perhaps looking at having robotic police force? How do we respond to this attempt to hijack our free will and totally reform our societies? They are creating this crisis, and of course this has happened many times before. There's a false flag event, and then they have a response that they've already generated and they've thought about, very carefully. The answer to this pandemic threat is a system of control, absolute control. So surveillance, track and trace, health passports, lack of freedom of movement, everything becomes conditional. There's talk about universal basic income, which is of course also conditional, so you probably won't be getting it if you're not vaccinated. They're installing this system which they say is like the virus safeguard. As long as we have these systems in place, then we don't have to fear when the next pandemic hits. As we know, Fauci has said this is the era of pandemics, so we can suspect that there will be more of where this came from. So they have it all under control, the way they want to rebirth the society after the crisis. And this is why they talk about new normality. They want to install a permanent new set of norms, a new culture. We are creative beings, so we have the potentiality, we have the power to choose which way we want to move as humanity, as humankind. The word of today is community, parallel society. And we don't need anyone's permission for that. We have God-given right to be here on this earth just the same as all the other animals. So we can simply take back our lives, stop following these immoral rules, and ignore the powers that shouldn't be, and simply gather and create our own communities, our own societies. This is already happening all around the world. People are organizing themselves, they're developing new skills, discovering their gifts, and finding the joy of being self-sustained, of being self-sovereign, realizing that the system we have, this top-down control system, is totally useless at the end of the day. We have all the skills that we need for a good life that we can exchange with each other. It's an opportunity for immense liberation and restructuring of our communities and rediscovery of humanity, what it truly means to be a human being on this earth. If you ask people, like, why did you wake up? Or what made you see world through different eyes? Normally it's one of two things. It's a trauma. It's a significant, painful event that shook your foundations, crumbled up your worldview, and made you reprioritize everything again. The second option is that you've met somebody who touches you and inspires you on such a level that you are able to take in new ideas. So you've met someone who has such a strong impact on you that a conversation with them can actually change the way you see yourself in life. Oftentimes it's one of the two. And so life will keep on giving these opportunities for all of us to rethink and reprioritize our values and our life every step of the way. But I wish that it wouldn't have to be through trauma, that it could be through dialogue and exchange of ideas. So this is why activism is key. So if you haven't discovered yet, you know, what is happening beyond the public narrative, then think, how do you feel about what is going on? Does this situation make you feel anxious, fearful, powerless, small? What if I told you that there's a whole other way to respond to this thing? And that other way will make you feel liberated, empowered, inspired, and full of purpose. I think honestly, those of us who have discovered that path to personal empowerment and liberation, we can just shine that beacon of light and show that example by living that example. And through that, hopefully those who are looking for another way to live, for a way out of this fearful world, will come to find us and be inspired by what we do. So what to say to those who are terrified to come to the realization that we are actually not free and that we have been enslaved for a very long time? Most of us can sense that, but don't want to fully accept that, because that realization will ask us to act in different ways in order to free ourselves from that system of slavery. Awakening as a word can seem as something that is patronizing, but honestly I think it is the most accurate term to use, because you are awakening also to your own power and your own potential, who you are truly inside. So when you come to awaken to yourself, that you're supposed to be a free being on this earth with divine rights, it's a painful process. It's not that you'll be sitting under a Bodhi tree in enlightenment. Awakening comes through total destruction and crumbling down of your belief systems. But that is the birthing process. You cannot birth a new worldview or new way of being without pain. It's an opportunity for us to trust life and see what happens, you know. Take a chance to explore, well, what is my family member or friend telling me? Could there be truth to that? Let me have a look and start exploring those questions. And if you start feeling fear or like your entire world is crushing down, there's loads of us around you who are going to support you and take you to our communities with open arms and tell you that we've all been there. There's no way to avoid that. It humbles you because you see that we've all been lied to, and none of us were immune to that at some point. All of us have had to have that painful realization that we've been fooled, we've been taken advantage of, we've been enslaved. So that pain is an initiation into adulthood. The willingness to truly take charge of your life and be responsible for the choices you make, not be a victim of somebody else's tyranny. You know? In our culture, all these rites of passage are missing. We don't have cultural initiations anymore. You know, I spent a long time with the indigenous in the Amazon rainforest of Peru when I was learning the ancestral healing arts and Amazonian plant medicine. And there you have these rites of passage, these initiations. From boy to man, from girl to woman. But if you remove them and put something distorted in its place, like now we have the initiation of moving out of school into debt slavery. That is like the initiation of adulthood now. It does not really prepare you to make independent decisions in your life. It's a form of being that we don't even know is wrong until we've experienced something else instead. You know, it's so normal to us to be dependent for everything that we don't even realize the prison that we're living in. So this is an opportunity to shake those confines, you know, really come to realize that the imprisonment starts in the mind. This is why activism is so important, because we can bring the information, the message, the knowledge to the people who cannot find it because all media is controlled and everything's being censored. So we have then the duty, because we love our fellow sisters and brothers, because we're all the one human family, to talk to them and to go out of your social media and actually go onto the streets and meet your local community, you know, talk to your business owners and you know, shops and gyms and churches and libraries, and speak to the people and help them realize that this COVID is just one small step, a part of this larger agenda 2030 and fourth industrial revolution. And when they see the bigger picture, you know, they understand that it's not that we are somehow pandemic deniers, but you could accurately say that we are, but that there is more to it. It's not that we have some kind of obsession against this one thing. We see the entire picture, and we see that this is a fundamental transformation of our societies into absolute control and technocratic, you know, transhumanist societies. Jason Christoph actually said about me that I'm a guardian of humanity, and I really resonated with that, and I really like that. That has been the core of my message these last 2 years, is how do we protect the sacred heart of humanity? How do we protect the essence of what it means to be a human being? So this is why I speak a lot about how we communicate with one another, how we approach the police, because if we understand that polarization and dehumanization are crucial major steps and stages of genocide, then we must also realize that we have to alleviate that with all of our power. We have to create dialogue and bring ourselves closer together rather than be part of the problem, which is this division and segregation. You know, there's only so far we can go in terms of contributing to this change in our societies. So if we give the example and we lead a liberated life and we do everything in our power to create community, you know, find our own sources of energy, grow our own food, learn how to heal ourselves, then I believe that we will just simply show a more attractive, a more humane option. And at some point, you know, that way of life will draw people to us. They will begin to experience such levels of depression and isolation in these smart cities, in these technocratic, you know, slave camps, that they will seek us out and they will say, hey, what is it like over the fence? You know, what's it like on your side of the town? And they will come to our eco-villages and they will experience humanity again. I honestly don't believe that there's anything more that we can do. Just, we are the change. So if we express the human potential with love and consciousness and joy, then others will just gravitate towards it. It's a bit like a bonfire, just warm, and everyone wants to gather around that. These are the communities that we are creating. That is the solution.